I worked as a cleaner in a millionaire's house for 30 years. When he died, his children laughed at me during the funeral. But a week later, the lawyer called and said, "You need to come immediately." What he told me changed my life forever. I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I still remember the first time I walked through those massive oak doors of the Harrington mansion. It was January 1994, and I was 28 years old, desperately needing a job after my husband left me with nothing but debt and a broken heart. Mr. Charles Harrington, a self-made millionaire who built his fortune in real estate, needed a housekeeper. I needed a lifeline. "Mrs. Collins," he said that day, his kind eyes studying me carefully, "I don't need perfection. I need honesty and dedication." I gave him both for 30 years. The mansion became my second home. Every morning at 7, I would arrive to find Mr. Harrington already in his study, reading the newspaper with his coffee. We developed a comfortable routine, a mutual respect that transcended the employer-employee relationship. He would tell me about his business deals, and I would listen, occasionally offering the practical wisdom of someone who understood the value of a dollar. "You remind me of my late wife, Mary," he once told me, using the American version of my name that he preferred. "She had your same no-nonsense approach to life." That's a compliment, by the way. His wife had died before I started working there, and his 2 children, Victoria and James, had long since moved away to pursue their own lives. Victoria married a banker and lived in Manhattan, while James bounced between failed business ventures in California. They rarely visited, maybe twice a year if their father was lucky. But I saw Mr. Harrington every day. I watched him age from a vigorous 60-year-old to a frail 90-year-old. I prepared his meals according to his doctor's orders, made sure he took his medications, and kept him company during the long evenings when loneliness seemed to seep through the walls of that big empty house. "Mary," he would say, "you've been more family to me than my own blood these past decades." I always brushed off such comments with a laugh, but they touched me deeply. The truth was, he had become family to me too. I had no children of my own, no siblings, and my parents had passed away years ago. Mr. Harrington filled that void, and I'd like to think I filled his. Everything changed 6 months before his death. Victoria and James started visiting more frequently. Suddenly, they were model children, concerned about their father's health and welfare. I should have been happy for Mr. Harrington, but something felt wrong. The way they looked at me, as if I were an intrusive piece of furniture. The way they whispered in corners and fell silent when I entered rooms. "Mary, don't mind them," Mr. Harrington said one afternoon after a particularly tense visit. "They're worried about their inheritance, that's all. They think everyone is after my money." "I would never," I started to protest. "I know," he interrupted gently. "That's exactly why I trust you." The visits increased. Victoria began making lists of the house's contents, photographing antiques with her phone. James started asking pointed questions about his father's finances, his various accounts, his properties, and they both began treating me with barely concealed contempt. "The hired help shouldn't be sitting in the family room," Victoria said one evening, her voice dripping with disdain as she found me keeping her father company while he watched the news. "Victoria, Mary is my companion and has been for 30 years, Mr. Harrington snapped. "She has more right to be here than you do with your twice-yearly visits." The tension was unbearable, but I stayed because Mr. Harrington needed me, especially as his health deteriorated. In his final months, I was there every day, sometimes sleeping in the guest room to be available if he needed anything during the night. Victoria and James visited frequently now, but they barely spoke to their father, spending most of their time with his lawyers and accountants. Mr. Harrington died on a Tuesday morning in October. I was holding his hand. He opened his eyes, looked at me with clarity that had been absent for days, and whispered, "Thank you, Mary, for everything. Don't let them break you." Then he was gone. The funeral was held at Trinity Church 4 days later. I sat in the back wearing my only black dress purchased from a thrift store for the occasion. Victoria and James sat in the front pew, playing the role of grieving children to perfection, accepting condolences from business associates and distant relatives. I approached them after the service to express my sympathies. After all, despite everything, they had lost their father. Victoria looked at me, then at James, and they both laughed. Actually, laughed. "Look, James," Victoria said loudly enough for others to hear. "The maid thinks she belongs here. After 30 years of dusting furniture, she probably thinks she's part of the family," James added with a cruel smirk. People were staring. My face burned with humiliation. I wanted to defend myself, to tell them how I had been there when their father needed someone, how I had held his hand as he died while they were probably checking their stock portfolios. But the words stuck in my throat. I turned and walked out of that church, tears streaming down my face. I had lost my job, my purpose, and apparently any dignity I thought I had earned over 3 decades of service. What hurt most wasn't the cruelty, it was the injustice of it all. I thought that was the end of my connection to the Harrington family. I was so very wrong. 1 week after the funeral, I sat in my small apartment staring at my bank statement. The numbers were brutally honest. $3,247. That was all I had after 30 years of work. I had lived modestly, sending money to my elderly aunt before she passed, helping friends in need, never thinking to save aggressively because I always had steady employment. Now I had nothing. No job, no prospects, and at 58 years old, who would hire me? The thought of starting over terrified me. I had given the best years of my life to the Harrington family, and what did I have to show for it? Humiliation at a funeral and a nearly empty bank account. I spent those days in a fog of depression and anxiety. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victoria and James laughing at me, saw the pitying stares of the other mourners. The unfairness of it consumed me. Mr. Harrington had been a good man, a kind man, and his children had barely known him. Yet they would inherit everything while I had nothing. My phone rang on the 7th day after the funeral. I almost didn't answer it, assuming it was another bill collector or someone calling about a job I was underqualified for. But something made me pick up. "Mrs. Collins, this is Robert Hendricks from Hendricks, Walton & Associates. I was Mr. Charles Harrington's attorney." My heart sank. They probably wanted me to return keys or sign some paperwork confirming I had no claim to anything from the house. More humiliation. "Yes," I managed to say. "Mrs. Collins, you need to come to my office immediately. Tomorrow morning, if possible. 9 o'clock. It's regarding Mr. Harrington's will, and your presence is required." "I don't understand," I said. "Why would I need to be there?" "All will be explained tomorrow, Mrs. Collins. Please don't be late. This is very important." He hung up before I could ask more questions. I sat there holding the phone, my mind racing. Why would they need me at the will reading? Mr. Harrington had mentioned once, years ago, that he might leave me a small token of appreciation in his will, maybe $1,000, or one of the books from his library that he knew I admired. But surely that didn't require an urgent meeting, unless Victoria and James were planning to contest even that small gesture. The thought made my blood boil. They would get millions and couldn't let me have even a minor token of their father's appreciation. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Mr. Harrington's last words, "Don't let them break you." What had he meant? At the time, I thought he was just encouraging me to stay strong in the face of his children's cruelty. But now, those words felt weighted with something more. I arrived at the law office 15 minutes early, my hands shaking as I pressed the elevator button for the 14th floor. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled at me and asked me to wait. The waiting area was all dark wood and leather chairs, the kind of place that screamed old money and power. Victoria and James arrived exactly at 9 o'clock, both dressed in expensive black, still playing the role of mourners. When they saw me sitting there, their faces twisted with confusion and anger. "What is she doing here?" Victoria demanded of the receptionist. Before anyone could answer, Robert Hendricks himself appeared, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a no-nonsense expression. "Miss Harrington, Mr. Harrington, Mrs. Collins, please follow me." We were led into a conference room with a long mahogany table. Hendricks sat at the head, and we arranged ourselves with me on one side and the siblings on the other, as if we were preparing for battle. "Let's begin," Hendricks said, opening a leather folder. "The last will and testament of Charles Robert Harrington." He read through the formal language, and I tried to follow along, but my heart was pounding so hard I could barely concentrate. There were bequests to various charities, instructions about his business holdings, and then to my children, Victoria Margaret Harrington and James Charles Harrington. I leave the sum of $50,000 each to be paid in a single installment. The room went silent. Victoria's face turned white, then red. "50,000?" she whispered. "That's impossible. He was worth over 20 million. Hendricks continued reading, his voice steady. "To Mary Margaret Collins, who has been more daughter to me than my own children, who has shown me loyalty, compassion, and genuine love for 3 decades, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes my home, all properties, investments, and personal belongings. She has earned every penny through years of devoted service and true friendship." The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, certain I had misheard. $20 million? The house? Everything? "This is fraud!" James shouted, jumping to his feet. "She manipulated him. She's a con artist." "Mr. Harrington," Hendricks said coldly, "I can assure you this will is completely legal and was made with your father's full mental capacity. It was updated 3 months ago, and I personally ensured he understood every word." Victoria was staring at me with such hatred that I felt physically afraid. "You won't get away with this," she hissed. "We'll fight this. We'll destroy you." But in that moment, despite my shock and fear, something shifted inside me. Mr. Harrington had seen me. He had valued me. He had given me not just money, but validation, recognition, and the means to finally have security. And I wasn't going to let his children take that away. "Mr. Hendricks," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded, "what do I need to do to execute this will?" His smile was slight but approving. "We have a lot to discuss, Mrs. Collins, and I suggest we do so privately." Victoria and James stormed out, their threats echoing down the hallway. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. And I was going to use it wisely. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of legal procedures, document signings, and meetings with accountants. Robert Hendricks proved to be not just an attorney, but an ally. He explained everything patiently, helping me understand the complexity of the estate I had inherited. "Mrs. Collins," he said during one of our meetings, "Mr. Harrington began planning this years ago. He knew his children would contest it, so he built an ironclad case. We have medical evaluations proving his mental competency, video recordings of him explaining his wishes, and documentation of every decision." "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked, still struggling to process everything. "He wanted to protect you from their wrath while he was alive, and he knew that if you knew, you might try to talk him out of it." Hendricks paused. He was a shrewd man, Mrs. Collins. He loved his children, but he saw them clearly. He told me once, "I gave them every advantage in life. The best schools, seed money for their ventures, everything. They squandered it all and only came back when they smelled death. Mary earned this inheritance every single day for 30 years. Those words made me cry, not sad tears, but tears of gratitude and validation. But Victoria and James weren't going to disappear quietly. 2 weeks after the will reading, I received the first letter from their attorney, a shark named Marcus Pemberton from one of Boston's most aggressive law firms. They were contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and diminished mental capacity. "Expected," Hendricks said when I showed him the letter. "And we're prepared. They have no case, Mrs. Collins. But they have money. Their own money from trust funds their mother left them, and they're going to make this as difficult and expensive as possible." I moved into the Harrington mansion 3 weeks after the funeral. It felt strange at first, sleeping in the master bedroom suite instead of going home to my tiny apartment. But it also felt right, like Mr. Harrington was there approving of my presence. The house needed work. It had been neglected in Mr. Harrington's final months. I threw myself into restoration projects, meeting with contractors, gardeners, and decorators. It gave me purpose and helped me understand the full scope of what I had inherited. The house alone was worth $3 million. Victoria and James began their campaign of harassment almost immediately. They showed up unannounced, demanding to be let in, claiming they needed to retrieve family heirlooms. I refused, following Hendricks' advice to not let them inside under any circumstances. "This is my father's house," James shouted through the intercom one afternoon. "You're just the maid." I disconnected the call and phoned the police. They came, warned James about trespassing, and he left, but not before promising, "You'll regret this." The media got involved somehow. Local news ran a story. "Millionaire's housekeeper inherits fortune, children left with scraps." The comments online were vicious. People called me a gold digger, a manipulator, accused me of elderly abuse. My social media, which I barely used, was flooded with hate messages. I wanted to hide, to disappear. But Hendricks advised me to stay silent and let the legal process work. "They're trying to break you mentally," he explained. "If you make any public statements, they'll twist your words. Right now, we have the moral and legal high ground. Don't give them ammunition." Then, 6 weeks after the will reading, something unexpected happened. I was sorting through Mr. Harrington's study, organizing papers for the accountants, when I found a locked drawer in his desk. I had cleaned around that desk for 30 years, but never tried to open that particular drawer. It wasn't my business. Now it was my desk. I found the key in a small box labeled "For Mary" that Hendricks had given me. Inside the drawer was a folder marked "Victoria and James, the Truth." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were documents, printed emails, and a letter in Mr. Harrington's handwriting dated 2 years earlier. The documents were devastating. Emails from Victoria to her brother discussing their father's assets and how to speed things along after his doctor mentioned his heart condition. Text message printouts where James joked about the old man finally being useful by dying. Financial records showing they had stolen from their father years ago, taking money from his accounts without permission. But the letter was what truly changed everything. Mr. Harrington had written it clearly, with a steady hand. "To whom it may concern, particularly if my children contest my will, I am of sound mind and body as I write this. I want to document why I have chosen to leave my estate to Mary Collins. My children have shown me nothing but contempt for decades. They visit only when they need money, which I have given freely, hoping to maintain some relationship. But I am not blind to their true nature. Last month, Victoria suggested I might be happier in a nursing home where she could manage my assets. James has stolen $200,000 from my accounts over the past 5 years, thinking I wouldn't notice. I noticed. I forgave, but I will not reward. Mary has asked for nothing. She has given everything. She has been companion, nurse, friend, and the daughter I wish I had. This is not manipulation or undue influence. This is gratitude and justice. If they fight this will, release all documentation I have compiled. Let them explain to a court why they deserve anything. Tears streamed down my face as I read his words, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger. How dare Victoria and James now play the victims? How dare they try to paint me as the villain when they had stolen from their own father, wished for his death, and planned to institutionalize him to access his money? I called Hendricks immediately. I found something, I said. Documents, evidence about Victoria and James. There was a pause. Mr. Harrington told me about that folder. I was wondering when you'd find it. Don't touch anything else, Mrs. Collins. I'm coming over right now with a witness. We need to document everything properly. As I waited for Hendricks to arrive, I sat in Mr. Harrington's study, my study now, and felt something new bloom inside me. Not just determination, but righteous anger. They had tried to break me, humiliate me, steal from me. They had abused their father's trust and love. They wanted a war. They would get one. But this time, I had ammunition. Hendricks arrived within an hour, accompanied by a notary and a private investigator named Sarah Chen. They photographed every document, made certified copies, and cataloged everything with meticulous precision. This changes everything, Hendricks said, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something almost resembling excitement. These emails, the financial records of James's theft, the text messages, this isn't just evidence for defending the will. This is potential criminal activity. Criminal, I repeated, the word feeling heavy. Theft at minimum. Possibly elder abuse, depending on how aggressive we want to be. He looked at me seriously. Mrs. Collins, you have the power now to not just defend your inheritance, but to go on the offense. The question is, how far do you want to take this? I thought about Mr. Harrington's last words, don't let them break you. I thought about their laughter at his funeral. I thought about every cruel word, every hateful message, every attempt to portray me as a villain. I want them to face the truth, I said firmly, not for revenge, but for justice. Mr. Harrington deserves that. Hendricks smiled. Then let's give them the truth. 3 days later, we filed a counter motion in the probate court, not only defending the will, but presenting all the evidence of Victoria and James's misconduct. We included Mr. Harrington's letter, the financial records of James's theft, and the particularly damning emails discussing their father's death as a financial opportunity. The media, which had been painting me as a villain, suddenly had a much more interesting story. Millionaire's children accused of elder abuse and theft made for better headlines than greedy housekeeper. Victoria and James's response was swift and vicious. They showed up at the mansion 2 days after our filing, but this time they brought Marcus Pemberton, their attorney, and they were prepared for confrontation. I watched them approach through the security camera, a system I'd had upgraded after their harassment began. They rang the bell persistently, and when I didn't answer, Pemberton began shouting at the camera. Mrs. Collins, we know you're in there. This ambush in court is unacceptable. We demand to speak with you. I picked up the intercom. Mr. Pemberton, you can speak with my attorney. I have nothing to say to any of you. You have slandered my clients with lies, he shouted. Those documents are forgeries. Victoria pushed closer to the camera. Her perfectly made-up face was twisted with rage. You bitch! You poisoned our father against us. You fabricated those documents." "The documents are real, and you know it," I said, surprised by my own calm. "Every email, every text message, every fraudulent withdrawal, all real, all traceable, all documented." James stepped forward, and his expression was different from Victoria's rage. He looked calculating, dangerous. "Mary," he said, his voice unnervingly soft, "you're making a serious mistake. You think you've won, but you don't understand how the world works. We have resources. We have connections. We can make your life a living hell." "Is that a threat, Mr. Harrington? Because I'm recording this conversation." "It's a promise," he said coldly. "Drop the counter motion, take $2 million, and disappear. That's our offer. It expires in 24 hours. "The estate is worth $20 million, I replied, "and it's mine. Your father wanted me to have it." "Our father was a senile old man who you manipulated," Victoria screamed. "Your father was brilliant until his last day, and we have medical records proving it. We have video of him explaining his wishes. We have his letter, written in his own hand, explaining exactly why he disinherited you." I paused. "And now we have this conversation where you've threatened me, tried to bribe me, and slandered your own father. I'll make sure the judge sees this recording, too." Pemberton grabbed Victoria's arm. "We're leaving. This conversation is over." But James stayed, staring at the camera with cold hatred. "You have no idea what you've started, Mary. No idea what we're capable of." "Neither do you," I replied, and disconnected the intercom. My hands were shaking as I watched them leave. The adrenaline that had kept me strong during the confrontation evaporated, leaving me weak and frightened. James's threat had felt real, visceral. These weren't just entitled rich kids anymore. They were dangerous. I called Hendricks immediately and sent him the recording. He listened to the entire exchange, then said something that chilled me. "Mrs. Collins, I think you should consider hiring personal security. I'm not trying to scare you, but people have done terrible things for far less than $20 million. That night, I couldn't sleep in the mansion. The house that had felt like a sanctuary now felt vulnerable, exposed. Every sound made me jump. I eventually moved to the guest room on the second floor with my phone clutched in my hand, ready to call 911. By morning, I was exhausted and terrified. Hendricks arrived at 8 along with Sarah Chen, the private investigator. "We're not going to let them intimidate you," Sarah said firmly. "I've dealt with people like this before. They're bullies who've never faced real consequences. That's about to change." She helped me install additional security measures: panic buttons, better cameras, reinforced locks. She also recommended a personal security consultant who could stay on the property if I felt unsafe. "But Mrs. Collins," Sarah added gently, "you also need to take care of yourself mentally. This is incredibly stressful. Do you have friends, family, anyone who can support you?" I realized with a sad start that I didn't. 30 years of dedicating my life to Mr. Harrington meant I had let friendships fade. I had no one. "Then take a few days," Hendricks suggested. "Get away from the house. Go somewhere they can't find you. Rest. Regroup. We have everything under control legally, and the court date isn't for another month. You need to be strong for what's coming." He was right. I packed a bag, rented a small cottage on Cape Cod under a false name, and disappeared for 5 days. No phone calls, no internet, no news. Just me, the ocean, and time to process everything that had happened. By the 3rd day, I felt human again. By the 5th day, I felt ready. Victoria and James had tried to break me, but I was still standing. And I was going to make sure Mr. Harrington's wishes were honored, no matter what it cost me. I returned from Cape Cod on a Wednesday morning, feeling renewed and mentally prepared for whatever came next. The mansion welcomed me back with silence and sunlight streaming through the tall windows. It was truly my home now, and and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. But Victoria and James were not done. They had simply changed their strategy. 2 days after my return, I received a flower delivery, an enormous arrangement of white roses and lilies, the kind that cost several $100s. The card read, "Dear Mary, we've been terrible. Can we please talk? Let's find a way to honor Dad's memory together. Victoria." I threw the flowers in the trash. The next day, a jewelry box arrived via courier. Inside was a beautiful diamond bracelet, easily worth $10,000. The note, "Please forgive us. Family is more important than money. James and Victoria." I returned it unopened. Then came the phone calls, dozens of them, from numbers I didn't recognize. When I finally answered one, it was Victoria, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Mary, please don't hang up. I just want to talk woman to woman. I know we've been awful to you. James and we've been doing a lot of soul searching. We were devastated by Dad's death, and we lashed out at you because we were jealous." "Jealous?" I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "You got to spend time with him. You were there for him when we weren't. We're not contesting that you were good to him, Mary. We just want a chance to make things right. Could we meet? Maybe for coffee? Just to talk?" "Victoria, your lawyer filed a motion calling me a con artist and demanding a psychiatric evaluation. You showed up at my home with threats, and now you want coffee." "That was Marcus's idea, not ours," she said quickly. "He's overly aggressive. We've actually fired him. We have new representation, someone much more reasonable. Mary, we don't want to fight anymore. We're willing to settle. We're willing to accept Dad's decision. We just want to find some common ground." It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't seen the documents in Mr. Harrington's drawer, if I hadn't read their emails about speeding things along, I might have believed her. "What kind of settlement?" I asked, curious to see where this was going. "We're not asking for much. Just some personal items that belong to our mother, some family photos, and maybe enough to cover the legal fees we've already incurred. Say, $500,000 each. It's nothing compared to what you're getting, and it would let all of us move forward." There it was, $1 million dressed up as reconciliation and family harmony. "I'll think about it," I said and hung up. Hendricks nearly had a heart attack when I told him about the call. "Do not engage with them without me present. This is exactly what they want. To get you to make an agreement without proper legal counsel. Relax, Robert, I'm not giving them anything. But I wanted to hear what their angle was." "Their angle is manipulation," he said firmly. "They think they can appeal to your loneliness, your desire for peace. Don't fall for it." But Victoria wasn't finished. The next approach was even more insidious. She reached out to Father Michael O'Brien, the priest from Trinity Church who'd conducted Mr. Harrington's funeral. Father Michael called me, his voice gentle and concerned. "Mary, dear, I had a visit from Victoria Harrington today. She's quite distressed about the family situation. She mentioned you might be open to mediation." "Father, did she tell you that she and her brother laughed at me during their father's funeral? Did she mention the threatening messages, the harassment?" There was a pause. "She mentioned there had been misunderstandings. She seems genuinely remorseful, Mary. As a Christian, I think forgiveness and reconciliation are—" "Father Michael, I respect you, but Victoria is lying. She's trying to use you to manipulate me. I'm not interested in reconciliation with people who wished for their own father's death so they could inherit his money." The priest was quiet for a long moment. "Those are serious accusations, Mary." "They are, and they're documented. If Victoria contacts you again, please tell her to go through the legal system. That's the only communication I'll accept." After I hung up, I felt angry that they had dragged Father Michael into their schemes, but also proud that I hadn't wavered. Their attempts to appeal to my emotions, my supposed need for family, my faith, none of it worked because I saw through their facade. But the constant pressure was wearing on me. I realized Hendrix and Sarah had been right. I needed support, real support, not just attorneys and security systems. I needed friends. I thought about Mrs. Eleanor Vasquez, another housekeeper I had met years ago at a community center. We'd talked occasionally over the years, shared stories about our work, our struggles. I hadn't seen her in over a year, but I remembered she'd been kind and genuine. I found her number and called. When she answered, her warm voice immediately made me feel less alone. "Mary, my goodness, I saw the news about you. How are you holding up?" We met for lunch the next day at a small cafe far from Boston's wealthy neighborhoods. Eleanor brought 2 other women, Rosa and Catherine, both domestic workers who had heard my story and wanted to show support. "You're fighting for all of us," Rosa said, her eyes fierce. "These rich families, they think we're invisible. They think we don't matter. You're showing them we do." "I'm not trying to be a symbol," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to honor a good man's wishes." "That's exactly why you are a symbol," Catherine replied. "You're not backing down. You're not letting them intimidate you. Do you know how many of us have been abused, disrespected, pushed around by employers, and we just take it because we need the job? But you're standing up." Their words moved me to tears. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel alone. These women understood. They had lived similar lives, faced similar disrespect, carried similar burdens. "Thank you," I managed to say. "I needed this more than I realized." "We're here for you," Eleanor said, squeezing my hand. "Whatever you need, a place to stay if you feel unsafe, a shoulder to cry on, witnesses if they try anything. We've got your back." I left that lunch feeling stronger than I had in weeks. Victoria and James had money, lawyers, and connections. But I had something more valuable. I had truth, justice, and now a community of support. When Victoria called again that evening, trying another angle, this time pretending James was having a mental health crisis and needed help, I was ready. "Victoria, stop, just stop. I see exactly what you're doing and it won't work. See you in court." I hung up and blocked her number. Then I blocked James's number. Then I blocked every unknown number that had called me in the past week. The silence that followed was beautiful. Hendrix called the next morning. "The Harringtons have filed a motion requesting a psychiatric evaluation of you, claiming you're suffering from paranoid delusions. They've also requested a medical review of their father's mental state during the last year of his life." Can they do that? They can request it. The judge will deny it. We have overwhelming evidence of both your mental competence and Mr. Harrington's, but it shows they're getting desperate. When negotiations and manipulation don't work, they go back to legal warfare. "Good," I said. "Let them fight. I'm not afraid anymore." And I meant it. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera and saw Victoria and James standing at the door, both dressed casually, no lawyer in sight. Victoria held a bakery box, and James carried what looked like a photo album. Every instinct told me not to answer, but I was also curious. What was their play now? I opened the door, but kept the security chain locked. "What do you want?" "We brought Dad's favorite, lemon cake from that bakery on Newbury Street," Victoria said, holding up the box with a sad smile. "And we found some old photo albums we thought you might like to have. Pictures of Dad when he was younger, when Mom was still alive." "We're not here to fight," James added quickly. "We've been talking, really talking about everything. About Dad, about us, about you. We want to apologize. Truly apologize." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. But I left it wide open, visible to the street, and I kept my phone in my hand with 911 pre-dialed. They came into the foyer, and for a moment, we all just stood there awkwardly. Victoria placed the cake on the entrance table, and James set down the album. "The house looks good," Victoria said, looking around. "You've been taking care of it." "Of course I have. I've been taking care of it for 30 years. "Right, of course." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mary, can we sit down? This is hard for us." We moved to the living room, Mr. Harrington's favorite room with its view of the garden. They sat on the sofa, and I sat in the armchair across from them, maintaining distance. Victoria spoke first. "Mary, we owe you an apology. We've been horrible. The things we said at the funeral, the harassment, the legal battles, we were wrong. We were grieving and angry, but that's no excuse. We were jealous," James continued, his voice seeming sincere. "You got to know Dad in a way we never did. You were there for him when we weren't. That's on us, not on you." I said nothing, waiting. "We've been thinking about Dad's letter," Victoria said, pulling a tissue from her purse and dabbing at her eyes. "The things he wrote about us, they hurt, Mary, they really hurt. But they weren't wrong. We were terrible children. We took him for granted. We took his money and rarely gave him our time. We can't change the past," James said, leaning forward. "But we can change the future. We can honor Dad's memory by being better people. And part of that is acknowledging that he was right about you. You earned his love and his trust. It was an impressive performance. If I didn't know better, I might have believed them." "So we want to propose something," Victoria continued. "We accept Dad's will completely. We won't contest it anymore. The house is yours, the money is yours, everything is yours. All we ask," James said, "is that we can come here sometimes, to visit, to remember Dad, to see the home where we grew up. Not often, maybe once every few months, holidays perhaps. We're not asking for anything material, just a connection to our father's memory." Victoria nodded eagerly, "And maybe, over time, we could have a relationship. Not as employers and employee, as friends, as people who all love the same man." I looked at them both, at their carefully arranged expressions of remorse and hope, and I saw exactly what they were doing. "That's a lovely speech," I said calmly. "Did you rehearse it, or did it come naturally?" Victoria's face flickered. "Excuse me? You want access to this house. You want to be able to come and go, to maintain a presence, to establish a pattern of family connection. And then, when you find the right opportunity, you'll manufacture some sort of accident or claim undue influence is ongoing, or discover some proof that I'm not mentally competent. That's paranoid," James started. "Or," I continued, "you'll steal something valuable and claim it was always yours, that your father promised it to you, that I'm preventing you from accessing your rightful family heirlooms. Or maybe you'll just make my life so miserable with your presence that I'll sell the house to escape you." Victoria stood up and the mask dropped completely. "You ungrateful bitch. We came here trying to make peace. You came here trying to manipulate me one more time. You're not sorry. You're not grieving. You're scheming." James stood too, his face dark with anger. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won? Mary, you're a housekeeper, a glorified cleaning lady. You have no idea how to manage wealth, how to navigate society, how to protect yourself from the kind of attacks we can launch. Is that another threat?" "It's reality," Victoria hissed. "You might have fooled our father, but you won't fool everyone. We've been talking to people, Mary. Dad's business associates, his social circle. We're telling them the truth, that you isolated a lonely old man, poisoned him against his children, and manipulated him into leaving you everything. That's slander." "It's our perspective," James said coldly, "and people believe us because we're Harringtons. We're educated, sophisticated, respected. You're just the help." The casual cruelty of that word, help, was designed to wound, and it did, but not in the way they intended. It reminded me of exactly who they were and who I was. "Get out," I said quietly. "Gladly," Victoria spat. "But you should know, this was your last chance, Mary. We tried to be reasonable. We tried to be kind. You rejected us. So now we're going to destroy you. We're going to drag you through every court in Massachusetts. We're going to hire investigators to find dirt on you. We're going to make your life hell." "We're going to win?" James added, his voice venomous. "Maybe not legally, though we might, but socially, emotionally, we're going to break you. You'll be so exhausted, so isolated, so hated that you'll wish you'd taken our original offer." "Are you finished?" I asked. Victoria grabbed the photo album. There probably weren't any photos in it anyway, and the cake box. "You're going to regret this. Mark my words." "The only thing I regret," I said, walking to the door and opening it wide, "is that your father loved you despite you never deserving it. Now get out of my house." They left, and this time the masks were gone completely. I saw them for what they truly were, entitled, vicious, and desperate. I locked the door, set the alarm, and walked to Mr. Harrington's study. My study. I sat in his chair and allowed myself to shake, to feel the fear they had tried to instill in me. They were right about one thing. This was exhausting. The constant vigilance, the stress, the attacks. Part of me wanted to just give them some money and be done with it. But then I thought about Mr. Harrington holding my hand as he died, thanking me. I thought about his letter, his carefully documented evidence of their cruelty. I thought about Eleanor, Rosa, and Catherine, who saw me as a symbol of standing up against injustice. No, I wasn't going to break. They could throw everything they had at me, but I would stand firm. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about honoring a good man's final wishes. It was about proving that loyalty and love matter more than blood and name. I called Hendricks and told him about the visit. He listened to the entire story, then said, "Mrs. Collins, I need you to understand something. This is about to get worse before it gets better. They're going to escalate. Are you prepared for that?" "I am," I said, and I meant it. "Whatever comes next, I'm ready." The court date arrived on a cold morning in March, exactly 5 months after Mr. Harrington's death. The probate courtroom was smaller than I expected, but it was packed with observers, media representatives, curious onlookers, and several people I recognized from Mr. Harrington's business world. I wore a simple navy suit that Eleanor had helped me choose. "Look professional, but not wealthy," she had advised. "Let them see you as the working woman you are." Victoria and James sat with their new attorney, a woman named Patricia Drummond, who had a reputation for winning seemingly impossible cases. They were dressed in expensive mourning clothes, playing their roles to perfection. Judge Margaret Thornton entered, a severe-looking woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Let's begin," she said crisply. "This is a probate matter regarding the last will and testament of Charles Robert Harrington. Ms. Drummond, you're representing the contestants." "Yes, Your Honor. Victoria and James Harrington are contesting their father's will on the grounds that it was executed under undue influence by the primary beneficiary, Mrs. Mary Collins, who was employed as a housekeeper and used her position to manipulate a vulnerable elderly man." "Mr. Hendricks, your response." Hendricks stood, commanding the room effortlessly. "Your Honor, the will is valid, executed with full legal formality, and represents the genuine wishes of Mr. Harrington, who was of sound mind. The contestants have no evidence of undue influence. only disappointment that their father chose to reward loyalty and genuine affection over biological relation. Drummond presented her case first. She called a psychiatrist who had never met Mr. Harrington, but testified that elderly people are susceptible to manipulation by caregivers. She presented Victoria and James's financial records, showing they were successful professionals who didn't need the money, a laughable lie considering their documented financial problems. "My clients are not contesting this will out of greed," Drummond said passionately. "They're fighting for their father's true wishes. Charles Harrington loved his children despite their flaws. He would never have intentionally hurt them this way unless he was influenced by someone who had isolated him from his family." Then Victoria took the stand. It was a master class in false emotion. She cried at exactly the right moments, described a loving relationship with her father that had never existed, and painted me as a manipulative villain who had systematically poisoned Mr. Harrington against his children. "She was always there," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "Every time we visited, she would hover. She monitored his phone calls. She told us when we could and couldn't visit. We thought she was just being protective, but now we understand. She was isolating him." It was pure fiction, but she sold it beautifully. James's testimony was similar, adding details about how I allegedly refused to let them see their father alone, how I accidentally failed to pass along their messages, how I encouraged their father to believe they only cared about his money. When it was our turn, Hendricks was methodical and devastating. He presented the medical evaluations showing Mr. Harrington's mental competency up until his final weeks. He showed video testimony of Mr. Harrington, recorded just 3 months before his death, clearly and eloquently explaining his wishes. In the video, Mr. Harrington looked directly at the camera and said, "I am making this recording to ensure there is no doubt about my intentions. I am leaving my estate to Mary Collins because she has earned it through 30 years of devoted service and genuine companionship. My children, Victoria and James, whom I love, have shown me nothing but neglect, and in James's case, outright theft. This is not undue influence. This is justice and gratitude." The courtroom was silent as the video played. I saw several reporters frantically taking notes. Then Hendricks presented the documents from Mr. Harrington's locked drawer. The emails between Victoria and James discussing their father's approaching death as a financial opportunity. The text messages. The bank records showing James's theft of over $200,000. "Your Honor," Hendricks said, "the contestants claim to love their father and to be fighting for his memory. Let me present their actual words about him." He read from the printed emails. Victoria's message: "The old man's heart is finally giving out. Maybe by Christmas we'll be able to deal with this mess." James's response: "About time. I need the money ASAP." Victoria went pale. James started to stand, then sat down abruptly when his attorney grabbed his arm. "These are the loving children who claim they deserve their father's estate?" Hendricks continued. "These are the people who say Mary Collins manipulated their father against them? The evidence shows Mr. Harrington didn't need manipulation to see his children clearly. He saw them exactly as they were. But the most powerful moment came when I took the stand. Drummond cross-examined me aggressively, trying to rattle me, trying to make me seem calculating or deceptive. "Mrs. Collins, isn't it true that you spent increasing amounts of time with Mr. Harrington in his final years?" "Yes, he was elderly and needed care." "And isn't it true that during this time you encouraged him to distance himself from his children?" "No, I encouraged him to spend time with them. I thought family was important, but they rarely visited." "You must have known you were in his will?" "He mentioned it once, years ago. He said he might leave me something small, a token. I never asked for details, and he never offered them. I was shocked when I learned the truth. Shocked or pleased that your long-term strategy had paid off? I looked directly at Drummond, then at Victoria and James. I loved Mr. Harrington. Not his money, not his house, not his status. I loved him as a person. He was kind, intelligent, funny, and yes, lonely. His children made him lonely. I tried to fill that void. If that's manipulation, then I'm guilty. But I call it compassion. The courtroom was utterly silent. Drummond tried to recover. Mrs. Collins, you were an employee. Doesn't it seem inappropriate that an employee would inherit everything while the deceased's children get almost nothing? Would it be more appropriate, I asked quietly, for children who laughed at their father's funeral, who stole from him, who waited for him to die so they could inherit his money to get everything? Is that the kind of justice you're advocating? Your Honor, Drummond objected. That's not. But Judge Thornton held up her hand. I'll allow it. Mrs. Collins, continue. Mr. Harrington made his choice with full knowledge of all the facts. He knew his children's character. He knew mine. He chose to reward 30 years of loyalty over a biological relationship that meant nothing to them. That was his right. It was his money, his life, his decision. Drummond had no more questions. Judge Thornton called a recess, and we waited in agonizing silence for 2 hours while she reviewed all the evidence. When we returned to the courtroom, her expression was unreadable. I've reviewed the evidence presented by both parties, she began. This court must determine whether the will of Charles Harrington represents his true wishes or whether it was the product of undue influence. The standard is clear. The contestants must prove undue influence by a preponderance of the evidence. She paused, looking at Victoria and James. They have failed to meet that burden. The evidence overwhelmingly supports that Mr. Harrington was of sound mind, that he understood his assets and his family relationships, and that his decision to leave his estate to Mrs. Collins was made freely and deliberately. The video testimony alone is dispositive, but combined with his written letter and the documented behavior of the contestants, this court has no doubt about Mr. Harrington's intentions. Victoria started crying, real tears this time, tears of defeat. Furthermore, Judge Thornton continued, her voice hardening, this court is troubled by the evidence of financial theft by James Harrington and the callous communications between both contestants regarding their father's death. While those issues are outside the scope of this probate matter, I am referring those materials to the district attorney's office for review. James's face went white. The will is upheld in its entirety. Mrs. Mary Collins is the rightful beneficiary of the estate of Charles Robert Harrington. The contestant's motion is denied. This matter is closed. The gavel fell and it was over. The weeks following the court decision brought consequences that even I hadn't anticipated. Judge Thornton's referral to the district attorney wasn't just a formality, it was a nuclear bomb dropped on Victoria and James's lives. Hendricks called me 3 days after the verdict. The DA is opening a formal investigation into James for elder financial abuse and theft. Given the clear documentation, they're confident they can prosecute. What does that mean for him? I asked. At minimum, restitution of the stolen money. At maximum, felony charges with possible jail time. His financial career is over regardless. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I felt something quieter, a sense that justice was finally being served, not by me, but by the system Mr. Harrington had trusted when he documented his children's crimes. The media coverage intensified after the verdict. The story had everything: wealth, family betrayal, a working-class hero standing up to entitled rich kids. I gave one interview, carefully coached by Hendricks, to the Boston Globe. I never wanted fame or attention, I told the reporter. I just wanted to honor a good man's wishes. Mr. Harrington saw me as a person, not as a servant. He valued loyalty and kindness over blood relation. I think that's a message worth sharing. The article portrayed me sympathetically, and the public response was overwhelmingly supportive. My social media, which had been filled with hate messages during the trial, suddenly flooded with encouragement. Strangers stopped me on the street to say they were proud of me, that I was an inspiration. But the real satisfaction came from watching Victoria and James face the consequences of their actions. Victoria's life unraveled first. Her husband, the banker she had married for status and security, filed for divorce 3 weeks after the verdict. The prenuptial agreement she had signed left her with almost nothing. Rumors circulated that he had been looking for an excuse to leave for years, and the scandal provided the perfect opportunity. Her social circle, the wealthy Manhattan elite she had cultivated so carefully, distanced themselves. Invitations to charity galas stopped coming. Her membership at the exclusive country club was temporarily suspended pending review. She was toxic now, associated with elder abuse and family scandal. I heard through Hendricks that she had tried to sell the jewelry she owned to pay legal fees, only to discover that half of it was fake. Her husband had apparently been replacing her pieces with cubic zirconia for years. Victoria called me once, about a month after the verdict. I didn't recognize the number or I wouldn't have answered. "Mary," she said, her voice hollow, "I'm calling to... I don't know what I'm calling for. To apologize? To beg? I've lost everything. My marriage, my friends, my reputation. I can't even get a job. No one will hire me." I felt a flicker of pity, then remembered her laugh at her father's funeral, remembered her calling me the help, remembered every cruel word. "Victoria, you didn't lose everything. You lost things you never truly had. A marriage based on money, friends who were really just social connections, a reputation built on your father's name. What you never had, what you never tried to build, was character. That's what your father tried to teach you. That's what I can't give you. Please," she whispered. "I need money. I need help. We're family, aren't we? Dad wanted us to be..." "No," I said firmly. "We're not family. Family is built on love and respect. You showed your father neither. I owe you nothing, Victoria. Goodbye." I hung up and blocked the number. There was no satisfaction in her suffering, but there was justice in it. James's fall was even more dramatic. The DA's office moved quickly with the prosecution. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, security footage from the time he had accessed his father's accounts, even a voice recording where he discussed the theft with Victoria. His lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA refused. They wanted to make an example of elder financial abuse, and James was the perfect case. Wealthy, privileged, stealing from his own dying father. The trial lasted only 3 days. James was convicted of multiple counts of elder financial abuse and theft. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison and ordered full restitution of the stolen money, plus penalties and interest, nearly $500,000. This defendant betrayed the most fundamental duty a child has to a parent, the judge said during sentencing. He exploited his father's trust and love for personal gain. This sentence reflects the severity of his crimes and serves as a warning that elder abuse will not be tolerated in this state. I didn't attend the sentencing, but Hendricks did. He reported that James had broken down completely, crying and begging for mercy. His wife had already left him, taking their children. His business licenses were revoked. He would leave prison in his late 50s, broke and unemployable. The $50,000 Mr. Harrington had left them in the will. Victoria had already spent hers on legal fees. James's portion was seized to begin paying his restitution. Eleanor, Rosa, Catherine, and I met for dinner a week after James's sentencing. We gathered at a nice restaurant, my treat, which I insisted on despite their protests. "You did it," Rosa said, raising her glass. "You actually won. Against all the odds, against all the money and power they had, you won." "We won," I corrected. "I couldn't have done this without support, without people who believed in me." "What will you do now?" Catherine asked. "Are you going to stay in the mansion?" I had been thinking about that question a lot. Yes, but not alone. I'm going to turn part of it into something useful, maybe a resource center for domestic workers, offering legal advice, financial planning, education. Mr. Harrington believed in using wealth to make a difference. I want to honor that. Eleanor smiled. He chose well. You're not just protecting his legacy, you're building on it. The money, the $20 million that Victoria and James had fought so viciously to steal, sat in accounts, wisely invested by financial advisors Hendricks had recommended. I drew a modest salary for myself, enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. The rest would be used for charitable purposes, carefully documented and managed. I established the Charles Harrington Foundation for Worker Rights, focusing on protecting domestic workers, providing legal assistance for those facing abuse or exploitation, and offering scholarships for continuing education. The irony wasn't lost on me. The money Victoria and James had wanted to spend on themselves would now be used to help people they had always looked down on. 6 months after the verdict, I received a letter from Victoria. It was forwarded through Hendricks's office. She didn't have my address. The envelope was cheap, the paper thin. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won out. "Mary, I know you have no reason to read this, let alone believe me, but I need to say it anyway. You were right about everything. I was a terrible daughter. I was cruel, entitled, and greedy. I treated you, and so many others, with contempt because I thought money and name made me better than everyone else. I've lost everything now, and I understand what Dad was trying to teach me. Value isn't in wealth or status. It's in character. It's in how you treat people when you have nothing to gain from them. You had that. I never did. I'm not asking for forgiveness or money. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. I hope you're happy. I hope Dad's money is used for good. And I'm sorry for everything. Victoria." I folded the letter and put it away. It might have been genuine, or it might have been one more manipulation. I would never know, and it didn't matter. Victoria's redemption, if it was real, was her own journey to make. I had mine. Looking out over the gardens of the Harrington mansion, my mansion now, I thought about Mr. Harrington's last words. Don't let them break you. They hadn't. They had tried with every weapon they possessed: money, status, cruelty, manipulation, legal warfare, and I had stood firm, not because I was strong, but because I was fighting for something that mattered: truth, loyalty, and the simple recognition that every person has dignity regardless of their occupation or wealth. Victoria and James had learned the hard way that some things matter more than money. I had learned that I was stronger than I ever imagined. And Mr. Harrington, wherever he was, I hoped he was proud. 1 year after the verdict, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The Harrington mansion, once a symbol of wealth and isolation, had become a beacon of hope for workers throughout Boston. The Charles Harrington Foundation officially opened on the anniversary of Mr. Harrington's death. We held a ceremony in the mansion's grand hall, and over 200 people attended: domestic workers, labor organizers, attorneys who provided pro bono services, and supporters of worker rights. Mr. Harrington believed that wealth carried responsibility, I said in my speech, my voice steady despite my nervousness. He believed that those who have much should give much. This foundation will provide legal assistance to domestic workers facing exploitation, offer financial literacy classes, provide scholarships for education, and create a support network for people who often work in isolation and vulnerability. The applause was thunderous. Eleanor stood in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Next to her were Rosa and Catherine, and behind them were dozens of other domestic workers who had found courage in my story to stand up for themselves. The foundation quickly became my life's purpose. We hired a small staff, including a brilliant young attorney named Marcus Chen, who specialized in labor law, and a social worker named Jennifer Williams, who understood the unique challenges faced by domestic workers. Within 6 months, we had helped 43 workers recover unpaid wages, assisted 12 in filing complaints against abusive employers, and provided emergency financial assistance to families in crisis. The work was exhausting and emotionally draining, but it filled me with a satisfaction I had never known. But the foundation was only part of my new life. I had discovered something else I had been missing for decades: community and friendship. Eleanor had become my closest friend. We met for coffee every Tuesday morning, sharing stories and laughter, two women who understood each other's struggles. Rosa and Catherine were regular visitors to the mansion, which no longer felt like a museum, but like a home, filled with warmth and purpose. I even started attending Trinity Church again, despite my complicated feelings about Father Michael's initial involvement in Victoria and James's manipulation attempts. He had apologized profusely when he understood the full story, and we had found a way to reconcile. "You're showing us what real Christianity looks like," he told me after a service. Love, justice, mercy. Not in the abstract, but in action. I also reconnected with people from Mr. Harrington's world, business associates who respected him and wanted to honor his legacy. Many became donors to the foundation. One of them, a retired real estate developer named Thomas Bennett, became a mentor and friend. "Charles always said you were special," Thomas told me over dinner one evening. He had invited me to a charity gala, not as the help, but as an honored guest. He said you saw people clearly, without judgment or pretension. He was right. The social events were sometimes uncomfortable. I was still learning how to navigate a world I had only observed from the margins. But people were surprisingly welcoming. The story of my legal battle had made me something of a folk hero, and many women in particular sought me out to share their own stories of resilience. I had even started thinking about writing a book, working with a journalist who wanted to tell the story of domestic workers' rights through my experience. The advance alone would fund the foundation for years. But perhaps the most unexpected joy was watching the garden bloom. Mr. Harrington had loved his garden, and I had always maintained it carefully. Now I had time to truly nurture it, planting new flowers, creating spaces for meditation and reflection. I hired a young landscape architect named Sophie, who had brilliant ideas for transforming part of the grounds into a community garden. "This space should bring life," she said, "not just plants, but people. Imagine workshops here, children learning to grow vegetables, families gathering." Her enthusiasm was infectious. By late spring, we had transformed 2 acres into a thriving community garden, where local families, especially those in food-insecure situations, could grow their own produce. My life had purpose, community, meaning. I woke up every morning grateful and went to bed every night satisfied. The money Mr. Harrington left me wasn't just financial security, it was freedom to make a difference. The contrast with Victoria and James could not have been more stark. Through various sources, court filings, occasional news articles, mutual acquaintances, I learned how their lives had continued to deteriorate. Victoria had moved from Manhattan to a small apartment in Queens, working as a retail clerk at a department store. Her ex-husband had remarried quickly to a younger woman, and her children rarely spoke to her. The shame of the trial and her father's documented words about her character had made her unemployable in any professional capacity. I heard she had started drinking heavily, missing work, and had been fired from 2 jobs. Her $50,000 inheritance, the pittance her father left her, was long gone, consumed by legal fees and debt. A former mutual acquaintance saw her at a grocery store and reported back to me, unsolicited. "She looks 20 years older, Mary, completely broken. She asked about you, whether you were enjoying her father's money." There was so much bitterness, but also emptiness. I felt pity, but not guilt. Victoria had choices at every turn: to love her father, to respect others, to value character over wealth. She had chosen differently again and again. James's situation was perhaps even more bleak. He was serving his prison sentence at a medium security facility in western Massachusetts. I heard from Hendricks that his wife had filed for full custody of their children and won easily, given his conviction. The children had been instructed not to contact him. "He's requesting early release for good behavior," Hendricks told me. "But even if he gets it, he'll have years of restitution payments, a felony record, and no prospects. He'll be lucky to get a job delivering pizzas." James had also written to me multiple letters that Hendricks intercepted before forwarding. They were full of self-pity and blame, blaming Victoria for leading him astray, blaming me for being too rigid to forgive, blaming his father for being unfair. Never once did he take real responsibility. Never once did he acknowledge that his actions, stealing from his dying father, were morally bankrupt. I didn't respond to his letters. What was there to say? He had made his choices, and consequences followed. That was justice. Some people in my new social circle thought I should be more forgiving, more charitable toward Victoria and James. "They're suffering," one well-meaning foundation board member said. "Perhaps you could offer them some assistance. Show mercy?" But Eleanor understood. "Mercy doesn't mean enabling," she said firmly at our Tuesday coffee. "It doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their own actions. They had mercy from their father for decades. He gave them money, opportunities, love. They threw it all away. Besides," Rosa added when we discussed it, "Mary is showing mercy. She's helping people who actually need it, who are trying to better their lives. That's where compassion should go, to those who have been knocked down by circumstances beyond their control, not to those who destroyed their own lives through cruelty and greed." They were right. My resources, time, energy, money, were limited. I chose to use them for people who needed help, not people who needed to learn hard lessons. On the first anniversary of the foundation's opening, we held a celebration. Over 500 people attended, workers we had helped, donors, supporters, and friends. We announced that we had assisted over 150 workers, recovered more than $2 million in unpaid wages, and provided scholarships to 30 domestic workers pursuing education. Standing at the podium, looking out at all those faces, I felt Mr. Harrington's presence. This was what he wanted. His wealth used to lift others up, to fight injustice, to prove that everyone has value. A year ago, I said, I was told I was just the help. Someone without worth, someone who didn't deserve respect or recognition. Today I stand here knowing that every person in this room has immeasurable worth. Every nanny, every housekeeper, every caregiver, every worker who keeps our world running. You matter. You have dignity. You have rights. And this foundation will fight for you. The ovation lasted 5 minutes. People were crying, including me. It was the happiest moment of my life. That night, alone in the mansion that was truly mine, I sat in Mr. Harrington's chair, my chair, and thought about justice. Not revenge, but justice. Victoria and James had fallen because they had built their lives on sand, on entitlement, cruelty, and greed. When the storms came, they had nothing solid to stand on. I had built my life on rock, on character, loyalty, and service. The storms had come, fierce and relentless, but I was still standing. And I would keep standing, for myself and for everyone who had been told they didn't matter. Because we all matter, every single one of us. So that's my story. A housekeeper who inherited a fortune, fought against greed and entitlement, and won. But here's my question for you. What would you have done? Would you have fought, or would you have walked away? Would you have forgiven Victoria and James, or would you have let justice run its course? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you, if it made you think about loyalty, justice, and what we truly owe each other, subscribe to my channel. I have more stories to share, stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and finding courage they never knew they had. Remember, your worth isn't determined by your job title, your bank account, or your family name. It's determined by your character, your choices, and how you treat others when there's nothing in it for you. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing that a housekeeper could be a hero. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.